everybody. Wow. I wasn't supposed to be playing that song, but it came to me at the last moment. That's effortless mastery, actually. Not the way I played it, the fact that it came to me to play it. And that's not our subject for today, because there was also some nice harmony going on. But that's not our subject for today. Today, our subject is the mystery of lines. What are lines? Well, they could be melodies, or they could be the technology of lines over changes, or they can be all the melodic movement of Chopin or Liszt. They certainly are the melodic movement of Mozart and Bach. It's how they connect chords. Now, the people who took the harmony course know that chords can connect through a very simple process. But the same process is there when stringing those chords together, like a close line, a hanger, of that run through the changes through the same thing, simply voice leading, but also resolution. In school, I know when I first went to Berkeley, the first thing they showed me was 2-5-1 in the left hand. I said, wow, that's great, because I didn't know that. And it still is among the most clear things that you ever understand about jazz if you're going there to study jazz. And it's all schools, okay? The mystery is, how do you play lines? Wow, it was a bell. I think an angel just got their wings. And there it gets vague. Well, you got to listen to the music, or long transcriptions, right? Or scale tones, or third and seventh, or chord tones. These things don't get you there. They give you some of the information, but the problem is adapting the information to a sequence of chords. So, for example, there is source material, which we're going to get into, and which it will be downloadable. Source material means playing on changes, means just playing the palette for each chord is the scale that goes with those changes. So in popular music, or people can really riff because the changes are rather diatonic, which I think most of you know what that means. It means it's all within one key, so like, and I mean, it's beautiful. So the blowing would be. And that's easily achievable because there's no changing of the scales. In jazz, it gets much more sophisticated than that. Now, even jazz, if you go back to the 30s or 20s, was pretty diatonic, so they went in like, I was thinking of a tune that just went out of my head. Okay. You Made Me Love You. Now, great players like Prez and Ben Webster, they would go. Although it was much more involved melodically, it was still kind of diatonic. Then bebop became more of a technology, and the altered notes began to assert themselves. So the difference between playing on, okay. notes are altered notes coming from the altered scale. There's 3 versions of the altered scale. Do we have that, Sid? I don't remember, but I can point it out. And there's a lot of theory. You might have studied theory that explain this very differently. I look at it like if it's a C7 chord, it's not a melodic minor or another key. I don't get that. I'm a very bad student. So if it's a C7 chord, it's a C altered scale. My hands there? I don't know. I don't see my hand. Oh yeah, there they are. Yeah. Then there's the same scale, but the 13 or the 6 is flatted. And then there's a reason to do one that's got the flat 13 and omits the 5th. I already kind of gave you a hint when you use that. When you have one less note to use. Or let's say I start on the beat, but I start one note above. If I use the 5th, which nothing is wrong, but you see the difference. This is the trick. Why people can't learn lines as adults is because they're missing the key element. Using the palette slow enough and making the resolutions. Yes, it's still about resolutions. So first, let's just go over the source material, which is downloadable. And some of my friends may already have this. This is 251, a whole bar of 2, a whole bar of 5, a whole bar of 1. Just a few thoughts about 251. It's only one application of this linear thing that I'm going to tell you about. But 70–80% of all standards are some form of 251. So if you ever had the desire to play or write or solo on standards, you're going to be dealing with 251. So the first thing I will deal with is 251. So you could put up the Sid, the whole bar connections for 251, and it is downloadable too. If I start the 2 chord, brings me to the sharp 11. That's the voice leading. Now, if I started on the 2nd degree, it wouldn't land on the sharp 11 anymore. It would land on the flat 13. Starting to sound like jazz, right? Closest one to that is a flat 9. And so on and so forth, okay? You can take that off now, Sid. So let's say you really knew these scales, and you're going to play all the things you are. By the way, the genius of that song is that everybody that ever tried to play any jazz, that might be the first, it's either that or Autumn Leaves that they played. You know, so it's pretty amazing. Too bad that guy doesn't get a nickel. Well, he's dead, but too bad he doesn't get a nickel every time it's played, because all over the world, jazz people are beginning and they start with that song. So I'm just going to play the scales. You know, here's the truth in case you don't know it. You can put it on me, Sid. Put it on me. You don't need the piano. Sid, are you on me or are you on the keys? Be on me. Yeah, I mean, the keys are prettier. So, okay. That's that tune, right? If I just play the scales, it'll sound like scales. Now, one of the things that becoming familiar with would be the altered scales, but not as a scale, as color for the palette. So if I went, as you can see, using the altered scale on the 5 chord is much more colorful and reminds you of jazz, you know, since somewhere in the 40s and certainly into the 50s and the 60s. But if I do those same scales and I connect them to where I am closest to before the next scale, it's already going to sound like I'm improvising. So let's see. Mostly, I still back on. Mostly, I still use the scales. Occasionally, I did something different, and that's going to get into the essence of. But the thing that makes it sound like music is the connections. Okay, so I have some other source material which you'll look at, but the very good news is you will not be required to study so much more as reference. I mean, you can study it if you want to. Sid says he loves running through the scales every morning. I just heard something. So I'm looking at 251. Okay, we're good. So you can put that up, Sid. A lot of times the 251 is not a whole bar of each, but a half bar of each. And so this is the source material for that. Can you put it up, Sid?
Just 1 second, Kenny, I'm getting it up.
All right, meanwhile, I'll show you. And so on and so forth. Anyway, that's what it looks like. It's okay, Sid, I did it already. In minor, it would be. These are, I mean, people would call them licks and try to avoid them, but actually, to be able to play intelligently on standards is to be able to play intelligently on 251. So they have to be, that's like saying, no, I don't like using verbs. It's a cliche. That's pretty good. You know, you have to use verbs. These things connect you to the next place. So the way to study is it, whenever it's slowly, first of all, you know, they get into school and they start playing on tunes, you know, in ensembles or whatever, and they're already playing in time when none of that structure has been inputted. And so it's just kind of flopping around. And Bill Evans addressed it. There's a great video you can watch called Bill Evans on the Creative Process. He's interviewed by his brother, and the introduction is by Steve Allen. And at one point, he really makes the point of effortless mastery. He says, people want to, you know, be creative immediately on this stuff. So they play stuff that's approximate. That was his word, approximate. To me, approximate is actually giving it more credit than it is. Sometimes very far away from even approximate. But the reason it's approximate, because again, if you talk about effortless mastery, you're talking about how the ego dilutes concentration. So the concentration is on establishing the connections. And then the ego is put aside so that they are being established in an orderly way. Then the ego is put aside so that when you play, there's absolutely no need to hear this stuff. Now, this is a little bit of effortless mastery, practicing and playing. So you're practicing because you want to input the right, you want to model this stuff. like a computer, you know? You want the right model. When you play, you're gonna miss it. But if you keep practicing and you've taken that ego thing out of it of like, when am I gonna get there? And that's in every one of my lessons, you know? The worst question you could ask yourself is, how am I doing? Because all it does is make you impatient. But if you have a process that makes the connections, you start to invoke the law of what I call the law of familiarity. In spite of your worst fears about your talent or your abilities, repetition will create the model will start to seep in. So on one level, when you're practicing different ways of getting from here to there to there and changing it. And you're changing the key, but you're going slow enough to see and feel what you're doing. As you're playing at a speed not dictated by you, you know, this is sort of like programming, you know, thy will, not mine be done, you know, but do the work. The work is modeling beautifully crafted lines that, and how do they become beautiful every time? It has to do with resolutions. So now I want to introduce my particular way of working on this, which is original, and I call it string theory. Now, before you get too excited, I know someone else used string theory, didn't they? I think that title sounds familiar, somewhere from the 20th century. And I'm quite sure that's a lot more complex the way I use it. This is what I mean. Put that thing up, Sid. Okay. Striking, isn't it? Imagine you have 2 points and you have a string. What's the length of it? Since most of Western music is in 4/4 time, the length of that string is 8/8 notes. And those 2 points are exactly the distance of those 8/8 notes. That's the first example. However, what if those 2 points are closer together, but the string is the same length and you want the ends to touch the points? Obviously, you got to use up some string. Either you go in the wrong direction, or you go up and down, or you go past it and come back. In the third example, you still have a string that's the same length, but the points are further apart than the length of the string. The only way that connect the ends is by cutting it up into a broken line. And now, Sid, if you will indulge me, the next shot. Scales, chromatics, arpeggios. You learn how to express getting from one point to another, practicing choosing the points first, and then invoking the notes from the source material to get there for an intelligent use. Mostly, if you're talking about jazz, it's the intelligent use of the altered scale. Really, we're always like one note off if we're lucky. So you can take that down, Sid. So let me try to give you a few examples. Let's say I'm going to play on All the Things You Are, right? And my targets will be. And let's say the next one will be, I just have to come down the B flat minor scale. Right? Then let's say the last one is back to the A flat. The distance of those resolutions are exactly a scale. So it almost sounds like improvising, right? But what if I put those 2 notes closer together, like let's say, well, now I still need 8 notes for every one of those. So am I going to go? I don't think so. I've got to use up those notes. So I either have to go around or below, go the wrong direction, and come back. If I go, it's going to sound like a line you've been wondering, oh, that's what that shit is. It's not very sexy, it's not very romantic, but the absence of it, your heart could be in Kansas City, Chicago, New York, and the whole jazz tradition, and you still can't play these lines. So we need to de-romanticize it long enough to get the structure of it. The structure of it is not that hard. So let's say the points of this. Oh, let's see. I'm going to need arpeggios. We're defining arpeggios as the skipping of even one note. I forget what the note was. Now that goes to a G. I can't get there. Let's be further. Right? And then let's say the last note is here. So I may be able to do that off the top of my head, but in order to ever be able to just sort of have it emerge, it has to be studied quite clearly. And actually, that's what my courses are. I can show you the right thing, but because of that very same ego, it's very hard to practice on your own. You know, it's like they say in programming, an addict alone is a bad company. And really trying to practice on your own, you sort of modify it very quickly, particularly if you have any luck with it. So now you can put my hands on there, Sid. I'm going to play on all the things you are. I'm not going to pick the resolution points, but because I have that structure built in, I'm going to tell you what device I'm using as I'm doing it. Here we go. Arpeggio, scale, chromatic, scale, arpeggio, arpeggio, scale, chromatic, scale, arpeggio, scale, chromatic, scale, arpeggio, approach notes. Are you getting it already? And come back to me, Sid. Now you see, one of the most typical ways in this situation that chromatics are used as what they call approach notes. So there's a 2-note approach note, you know. There's a 3-note approach. Oh, what was that? 2? And a 4-note. So that's where the chromatic, let's say I want to get to, I want to get there, but I have too many notes of my 8-note string. You see what I mean? That approach allowed me to resolve. Arpeggio. There's that approach. When you add rhythm to it, of course that was the rhythm course. When you add rhythm to it, your palette of notes are selected from the scales. Approach notes and semitones are ways of using up notes to make your resolutions. So if I go, okay, but if I go, dig, or I can find the same note by inserting a chromatic, but then skipping a note so I still make resolution. So this already may get you a little dizzy. However, if studied under a controlled environment, you start to see the notes that you've never really understood, except that it is what it is. Now transcribing, and people always ask me, transcribing is standard in college. Is it good to transcribe a whole solo? Well, to me, it's good for your ears to transcribe a whole solo, but it's kind of a waste of time to learn that solo. because you're never going to fit any of that into a situation where you're blowing on changes. What's better is to take the juiciest parts of that, 2 bars, 4 tops, but 2 is even better, and say, wow, the way that goes. Let me really own that, you know? And I see it was moved around to make the resolution. And then it came down off the scale, almost like a ski slope, you know? And I really understand it. What do I do with it next? I put it in another key. So I'm forced to really understand the tones that contributed and where that resolution is. If you do it in a few keys, you start to own it intellectually. The other thing to understand about blowing on changes, well, many things, is that it has to be understood intellectually, and your fingers given enough time to express what your intellect now understands. And just letting that reverberate. Giving your intellect time, your fingers time to execute what your understanding now is. And I got to tell you that I've never recommended anything that I told anybody to practice more than 15 minutes a day. But if practice 15 minutes, I mean, you could practice it longer. The danger there is that it gets diluted and you're really just playing. Effortless mastery, it teaches you're practicing or you're playing. If I want to play, I am going to be as approximate as I need to be. If I'm practicing, I want to keep modeling the perfect symmetry of how lines connect. I'll do a course for you again, and don't go to my fingers, Sid, it's okay. But notice that my fingers are the ones that are playing this, not me. This is not how I would express myself, but I would have all this language. Pretty hard. This is where it gets melodic if you want it to be. Delayed resolution. That's one of those happy mistakes that only jazz allows. So you see how it works. Now, I would say we've only spent a half an hour together, and you all understand what I'm doing now. Wouldn't you say? Now, I guess you don't have to show of hands because I can only see one group of you, but have many of you played all the things you are? Probably that's a yes. What's the hardest part of the song? I think I talked about it in Effortless Mastery. Somebody want to, Vikas, can you unmute and say, what's the hardest part of the tune of All Things You Are? Or did I pick the wrong person?
For me, the bridge is the hardest.
The whole bridge?
No, just the, I think just the first part, first half of the bridge.
Really? 2-5-1 in G or 2-5-1 in E?
I think coming from the first part to the bridge is the hard part for me.
Okay, well, that wasn't quite what I was looking for, but that's okay. You know? So far, it's a democracy. Okay. Actually, the harder part is the second half of the bridge. It's not harder, it's less familiar. This is something all my students have to, even the ones that are here now that have been my students, you have to remind yourself of. What you don't know seems difficult, but in fact, it's unfamiliar. And you can prove it to yourself by saying, when you started practicing scales, what key do you start with? C major. And you may mess up 9 of those 12 scales, keys, but you won't mess up the C major one. Because that was the one you were most familiar with. And it was the one you were most familiar with because that's the one you always started with. So effortless mastery takes things out of sequence so that everything you do is the first thing you've ever done. And you don't rely, like Sid is getting really good, but in B flat or C minor. And I told him, if you're practicing, you're playing in another, you're reconstructing the same stuff in another key. If you're playing, you're probably playing in B flat or C minor. Because that's kind of getting ready to serve. And it's kind of like that. And those of you that were in the last class, this is great because you have to remind yourself what you can't do, you're unfamiliar with. The difference between hard, difficult, and unfamiliar is the difference between giving up on it or working on it.
But,
Am I hearing something?
yep. Well, I just want to comment about all the things you are. What I
Yeah.
find the hardest part is the bridge, but the part where there's a 2-5 in 2 beats each at
No,
first.
actually, no, they are a bar each, the bridge. A minor, 2, 3, 4, D7, 2, 3, 4, G, 2 bars of G. Then F
By
sharp.
2 bars of G, but when you get the C minor, then they're 2, 5, 1, G, but they're 2 beats each to 2 and 5.
I'm gonna, we'll take that offline sometime, Margaret, okay? Actually, it's a whole bar of G.
Yeah,
If I was gonna make the connection, I would slip into the altered scale. That's using nothing but the scales, but connecting them wherever I am, and that comes back to voice leading. So now right so far I'm talking about jazz because I'm talking about 251. But I'll stop right now. Do we have some questions? Because I want to show you there's all sorts of colors you can explore, and the linear intelligence, the
I
linear
have a
version
question.
still work the same way. So Sid, how do we do this?
You can raise your hands and I'll call you out.
Raise your hand and Sid will do it.
I
No
saw
problem.
Johnny had a question. Did you have a question, Johnny?
Yes, I did. I don't know if you folks can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much for this.
Yeah.
I filled so many pages with notes. I'm writing as fast as I can. You said like a whole book worth of intelligent things. But my question, Kenny, is how many altered scales? I mean, I'm already doing my scales all the time, but I would have to learn. That's an F minor altered scale. Is it all? How many altered scales would I have to learn to get through
There's
that?
an
sort?
altered scale, no, you would not learn any altered scales. You would use it as source material. I mean, there's only, I guess, 3 because it's like a diminished, right? So you either have. So. That's it. But you're not learning the scales. You're using, look, what's necessary. By the way, Tom, how you doing? How you feeling? Feeling good? I hope so. It's great to see you. Look, the value of an altered scale is not added scale. The notes in the altered scale that define jazz in the most conservative terms, but not diatonic anymore. I mean, it's like, this is not space age shit, okay? The altered scale was starting to be introduced more and more during the bebop period. But was still diatonic, and it kept moving. Then in the era of the birth of the cool, you heard more and more people using the altered notes. It's the flat 9, the sharp 9, the sharp 11, and the flat 13. That's really part of it that you're going to use. And if you use a part of it, I don't know who asked that question, but if I go like this,
Not me.
F minor, and I'm only gonna do 2 beats of F minor. Now that leads me to the flat 13, and that was 2-5-1 in E flat. If I started here, now I landed on the same note because I didn't go scale, I went arpeggio. So it's really this, you remember those games? I know when I was a kid we had them, they were all these little boxes, and you move them around until you get it to a certain thing. This is really what that's about. If I want to go 2, 3, 4, if I want to go, it really is measuring almost back from the resolution. And then you notice, if you actually invoke this non-musical thing, that you're playing the notes that you've heard all along, but you just didn't know how to do it. Now, when you practice whole transcriptions, you're really wasting a lot of time because you can't fit any of that into the music. However, if you take interesting moments, then the shorter the moment is, this is the way I teach, the shorter the moment is, the more it might emerge as you're playing through the changes. And actually, it's the first thing I've ever seen that absolutely takes you from soup to nuts to, oh, another angel got his wings. From soup to nuts to functional linear stuff. So let's take, we're still talking about jazz, I'm just using 2-5-1 because that's most of it. So any more questions?
Kenny, Felix had a question.
I have another question.
Who's that?
What's the question, Felix?
So someone spoke, I didn't hear you. So if you can raise your hand, I can see you on the screen. I'll call you out and you can unmute yourself and ask the question. But before that, I'll just read out Felix's question, which is, I have a question regarding the third step as the default way of performing from the space. How much should one practice this state versus other forms of practice? You often discuss the
I can't go
difference
too much
between...
off topic for this, but I'll tell you, the third step is playing what you can play. How much of that you should do when you're performing? All of it. If you stay within what you can play, you can be creative. If the ego says what you can play is not good enough, as you might have already noticed, that doesn't work anyway. You make a convoluted performance, and you might have been able to make a simpler performance and it would flow. The third step, yeah, that's a whole other discussion, which, you know, we'll always be coming back to it because it really is human nature. It's human nature why music isn't as easy as you think it is. I mean, why music is easier than you think it is. It's human nature. We put music on a pedestal, but it's kind of hard to see how it works from a pedestal. So, another question? All right, well, let me take it to a more interesting level. Those of you who took the harmony course, you know how you could have these, any chord works with any chord, right? So I'm going to say E flat minor major 7. Wow, that was nice. Do you all hear that bell? What is that? I know it is. It's actually the 6th of the E minor 7. But it's cool. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's people coming in, or many angels are getting their wings today. E flat minor 7, minor major 7. Hello, Michelle. How are you, my love? We'll get you there. There is here. That's what you got to know. Anyway, E flat minor major 7 to A minor 7. Those should not have any relation to each other. So if I went like, it would sound as disconnected as it seems. But if I went, now it sounds like one scale. But the colors change as the chords change. It does take a while to get there, but it would be impossible if you haven't studied how to get there. Because once you know how to get there and you give yourself enough time, I'm going to do, I don't know how many lines from E flat minor major 7 to A minor. You can make a love song out of it. Or it could be a Broadway song. That would be something like this. Let's say C minor. How about E minor? Oh man. This really does help you compose too. How about one chord? Should we say C sharp minor? You dig? It is a composer's best friend. It is a person who wants to play jazz. If you're not really playing it satisfactorily yet, there's only one way to study it. Without a destination. It's just about the pleasure of the journey. Uncovering, discovering. You know? Because whenever you think of, this is effortless mastery, but when you think about the destination, you never have the patience for the journey, do you? When you think about the destination, no matter what you're doing today, it's not enough. Does that resonate with anybody? Is there anybody that doesn't resonate with? So it comes under the heading of human nature. But human nature can be informed. Human nature can be sculpted. Human nature can be tamed to target the moment. Humans are the only ones that can think about the future, I guess. I don't know if they really know that or not. But whenever you're thinking about the future, you're having exceedingly unproductive now. The power of now, all that stuff. You know? So this is being in the now, connecting from here to there. And then, I mean, any change, you know, any changes. I want to do a little more of that for you, okay? I'm not going to really blow lines, but I'm going to show you that the same built-in structure creates fabulous melodies. C major, Lydian. E flat major, Lydian. F sharp major, Lydian. Let's go back to E flat. How about, where would we start? C major, Lydian. Want to tune to write itself? Learn this shit. B flat minor. D mixolydian. F minor, Dorian. In this case, you're not just voice leading from one note to another, you're voice leading the motif. That's a nice thing. Here we go. D sus. Let's say, I wish I could ask you to call them out, but we got too many people, you know, it would be blah, blah. F, Phrygian. Really improbable. How about D major 7? Mixolydian. Whole tone. In honor of the Paris Olympics, let's do the whole tone. Moving really fast, but with the structure. Music becomes really easy, you know? AI has come along. This is the first time I'm addressing AI. And people were wondering, or they should be, well, if you can cop my thing completely, what does it do for me anymore? It's no big deal, is it? The AI got me covered. You know what? It's irrelevant if the reason you make music, I'm sorry, I keep looking over here. It's irrelevant if the reason you make music is for your own sustenance, for your own heart, and for that heart to explode and connect with the hearts of others. It's not about the music. It's about the person. It's not about the music, it's about the mindset. AI changes, if you just hooked up on the music, you're gonna be disappointed because that thing, if it doesn't do it now, it's gonna do it in a year, spit out exactly what you could play. But it doesn't, you can't feel that, you can only feel yourself playing. So effortless mastery will have more relevance than ever because the musician has to bring it back to, this is for me. Because if it's for you, the AI has already copied it and it did 7 variations. Sooner or later, we knew that was going to happen. But as long as music is for the heart of a human, it doesn't matter. It's not the notes, it's the feeling. And it could cop that too, but it's the feeling you have playing the notes. And one of the things that disturbs, this is how the ego disturbs. Anybody that could be satisfied with this, like I could. Oh, you know, that's really all I need. And we know that a person can become God realized with one note. So if a person could become God realized with one note, how much does one need to play in order to receive the whole universe? Not much. That's why we work on our consciousness, the gratitude that pinky hit them. But that said, the ego perverts it by demanding language that you've never had a chance to become familiar with. So when we study rhythm, harmony, and melody, the supposition is, first of all, they're enlightened ways. This is an enlightened way to understand lines immediately. I think you all already do. I needed that because I had ADHD, I had very bad Tourette's. The fact is I never could get to a single theory book. I never got through any book. I mean, I didn't get through social studies. I didn't get through any Spanish book. I didn't get through, math, what do you call it? It's going out of my head right now, you know what I mean? Trigonometry, forget that. What's the one before trigonometry? That's it. Anyway, so what I was blessed with was a way of inventing one thing. And the one thing would deliver everything. So one thing I'm talking about is targets, from this chord to that. Whoever was talking before with frustration about, oh, how many scales do I have to learn? You pick 2 targets and you practice using the palette of the notes that are involved in that chord as slowly as you have to. And you keep making your way there. It's one practice. And as it's done year after year, that's the way you play. you listen to Chopin or Liszt, you'll get it. You know, it could be fast note. If you do, there's a great beloved tune called Very Early. Some very different changes right there. Bill. Right? If you go twice as fast. A very unusual, you might argue that the harmony of jazz has devolved because the tunes that Bill wrote and in the early 60s were so much more sophisticated, but it's still about making connections. So, more questions?
Hey, Kenny, we had a
I
few
got one.
questions. I know George had one.
Yeah, let's
George.
hear it.
Yeah, hi Kenny. I read your books many years ago and always enjoy your work, of course. So I'd heard somebody say, I mentioned this in chat, that in soloing we should make a statement and everything from that point should corroborate that statement. How do you feel about that?
Well, it certainly sounds reasonable, doesn't it?
I mean, to give
Problem is,
music
every
some,
time you did it, you couldn't do it.
I felt like I
Nor
could
could the
get a,
person that told you that do it. All
What's
right, let
that?
me distill that a little bit. It means you have a motif and then you play off that motif. Do you have to? No. It's a wide universe out there. If you want to, there's some studying that's involved. So let me, and about, you see, when you say making a statement or a very popular thing now is tell a story, I'm sorry, maybe I'm not that smart, but I don't know how you literally tell a story. I think the music tells the story of the consciousness of the person playing it. What's the story? Maybe some people actually can play and narrate. If they can't narrate the story, then I seriously doubt there is a story. But I don't care either, so it doesn't matter. But when you say make a statement, let's be clearer. You're talking about a motif. If I go, I'm dedicating that to the Paris Olympics as well. It was this. There's the Eiffel Tower right there. No, you know what I mean? There is a way, and I see it maybe, the only problem is if you have to think that way, you can't play. What if all the neurological stuff in me, I just came out from the cold or whatever, or I just got terrible news or whatever, this is all going to change how I'm going to solo. But now we're talking effortless mastery. I don't make the decisions when I solo. I follow the Shakti. Now, there's a word that, if you know, Kashmir Shaivism or Hinduism, there's a thing called Shakti, and I've mentioned it in the book.
John McLaughlin's band, isn't it?
I'm sorry?
John McLaughlin's band, right?
He had a band, well, that wasn't what I was referring to, but John
Yeah,
McLaughlin.
yeah.
Well, what he was saying, his band is light.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it.
I saw them. They were amazing.
I'm
Yeah.
damned if they weren't light. They sure were.
Yeah, yeah.
But when you follow the Shakti, you feel like there's an intuition, you have a connection with it. I have a friend that, it had the same way in A Course in Miracles, when a person is completely surrendered, they're listening, and that what determines what they say next. There are many, anytime you get to that close to really, I don't know how you define it, connection with the universal mind. I don't know if any, by the way, it's a good time to mention, did anybody read my second book? It's called Becoming the Instrument. Yeah, thank you. Lessons in Self-Mastery from Music to Life. because I don't know anything about life, but damned if a lot of those lessons from music don't seem to turn over really well. And following intuition only gets interrupted by the ego. Intuition, you trust the intuition, and then the connection between intuition and you grows. But that means you'll be more committed to the music you're able to play, because you're honoring yourself. When you're trying to say, I have musicians say now we're moving, but everything I teach gets to hear me anyway, because this is the truth of it, you know. Some people say, I'm trying to find my voice. I say, well, the next note you play, that's your voice. What they're trying to say is, I want to have a voice like someone I would respect. Of course, the thing means you're not respecting yourself. Your
Doesn't
voice is what
intention-
comes out.
Doesn't intention play into this for me? I mean, I totally hear what you're saying, but and not but and for me, I feel like sometimes if I set an intention, I can have the essence of that, so the music just doesn't wander around aimlessly. That's just been my experience, is just to kind of set an idea and then just kind of feel the essence of that as I play.
This is very nicely expressed. Can you
Yeah.
tell me one example of what your intention might be?
Well,
I don't disagree with that, but I just want to, like, for
Yeah.
example.
well, yeah, I don't know if you can hear me playing it, but I could set a motif and then take little pieces of that. Again, like I say, just have the essence of that. I can invert it. I can play with it like a cat playing with a toy or
You
something.
can do that.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
don't need to play, but you can do that, right?
yeah, yeah.
That's why you can have that intention. If you couldn't do it, you would be having an intention that was mismatched with what you're able to play. And people do that quite typically.
Do you know Ted Howe by any chance, Kenny?
No.
Okay, you reminded me of a little bit of looks and stuff. I thought maybe you knew him.
Well,
But
that's
we-
an insult to one of us, but anyway.
But no, not at all.
I'm kidding, I'm kidding.
But we did
I got you. Yeah, I have the intention of playing. Well, I can't finish that sentence.
Yeah,
That's just me. I'm not really telling you what you should and should not do, but I don't think anybody succeeds when they try to push themselves into areas that are not prepared to be played. I mean, there's just no exception to that. So what this is about, how do I expand the language? I wish I kept looking over here. How do I expand the language of what I'm playing? And the first word that comes to mind is patience. Second word, two words come to mind, is self-esteem, or appreciate what you can play. A lot of people think the best way to get better is to constantly be unsatisfied with how you play. It really doesn't go anywhere. You can't seem to bring it anywhere. The way to add anything to your playing is to start by knowing. This is the third step. Knowing what you can play. And it's a lot easier to stay with that if you appreciate it. It's like life. Oh, he lives in a big house. I live in a little house. The only thing that's restricting me is not the size of the house. It's my dissatisfaction with it. So you know what they say, I can't change the world, but I can change myself. As I go along in my life, I'm much more of a student of it. So I can tell you what I'm trying to do is take the circumstances of my life, the acceptable ones and the unacceptable ones, and trying to get them all to one column, a place that I can not lose my gratitude. Gratitude is very counter to dissatisfaction. Do I do it well? I don't know. I certainly don't do it perfectly. What is perfection? In effortless mastery, perfection is complete acceptance of your imperfections. And I'm sure that resonates with many spiritual paths, I'm sure. But it is a real thing. So if I move my hands, I mean, most of you can say by your own experience, you're playing, you get it in your head, I should be able to be more bluesy. What happens to your solo at that moment? It gets destroyed because you're actually asserting something while the hands are already doing what they do. I mean, if it's a piano or an armature or whatever. Or you say it should be more burning. I talked about this in the first book. So you start stomping your foot and you make it one burning bar and then the rest of it's a bunch of overplaying. So if there's one practice I've done just about all my life is, and this is a spiritual concept, the witness. The witness is a concept in the Holy Spirit. The witness is a concept in every spiritual path. Not every religion, but every spiritual path. So I'm witnessing. What happened? Why didn't I go on? I did not have the intention of doing any of that. The hands started to take me somewhere. The practice is appreciating where they go.
But it has coherency to me. When I hear that, you know what I mean?
Yes,
It's
what?
like, it has coherency to me. When
Yeah,
I
because I practice coherence.
yeah.
If I had not practiced, like most of you have not, I don't know you, but most of you have not practiced coherence when it comes to making melodies or lines. So what comes out is what you've put into it. And that takes some management of ego. Because ego will dilute your practicing and ego will destroy your playing. Looking for something that's not there. Can any of you say that's ever ended well? I mean, this is in everything I teach. There's no way I don't teach without that because I know that it's very easy for people. You can give people exactly what to do, but almost 100% of them won't be able to do it because there's another voice in there that's saying it's not enough, or it should have happened by now, or I wish I heard this 20 years ago, or I'll never get this. Does any of this shit sound right? Well, all of it's from the ego. None of it is helpful.
And Mike Longo would say this music comes from the back of the mind.
I'm going to ask you to maybe, because it's getting to be a little bit of a dialogue between you and me.
Yeah.
So with respect.
Of
Thank
course.
you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have something they want to say?
What do you tell
Yes,
students who?
we had, hey, go
What do
ahead,
you
Dan.
Somebody
What do you
has
tell-
to spoke, because I think we have, I don't know, a couple hundred people, so we certainly, I think one time is.
Yeah, we have Don, and then I'll get to Matt, Felix, Susan, and I
Sure,
also saw
okay.
Ali on. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah.
So, okay, what do you tell guys that come in and go, well, I started work on the arpeggios. I started work on the Abersalsa. I got bored, man. So I never learned how to play changes. I got bored. How do you talk to students who complain of boredom? That's common.
Well, practicing arpeggios is practicing like scales. They don't go anywhere. When you went to a tune, you couldn't put that much arpeggio in. You couldn't put that much scale in. Instead, you use it as source material. So arpeggios doesn't have to be 4 octaves or arpeggios. Let's say I play. Now I'm going to blow on that. Here's an arpeggio. That's an arpeggio, and that's a scale. If you keep measuring from one, this is why this is an enlightened technique. If you practice linearizing with the 3 examples I gave, too close, just the right amount, too far away, creates a scale or an arpeggio, or you put in a chromatic, now you need to skip a note. Here, let me give you a few more examples. Right, now if I go, fine, but if I want to get to the A, I go. So you have all these different ways of making one resolution to another. You might find that more interesting because it's always changing. You say, you don't take a whole tune. That's another way you sabotage yourself. You take a couple of bars and you focus on how, you take a few, the thing is this, you take a few 2 resolution points. You start from one place, you go to the other. How many ways you can get there? Let's say I'm going to go here. That's one note, and the other one is this. And I need 8 notes. Am I going to go? I don't think so. I have to go somewhere. I go. Those were 2 arpeggios. Well, what if I go? That's chromatics. And when you simply measure, you say, wow, that's like a serious bebop line. And at first, just being able to do it is the beginning of a realization that could alter your playing. It's not guaranteed. You can definitely learn, and you have in a sense just today, every combination of what makes lines what they do. But you can instill it, you can install it with a patience and a way of study, which is what these are always about. There's going to be a 10-week course, Sid will talk about it. For 10 weeks, you'll be measuring and finding these things. If you do it, if you're not, you can still do it. You can just start doing it. The good thing about stretching it out is it forces us to stay on one subject. When you think about your music, don't you change subjects, not even one a day. It's all these issues. And music is a gift that has not been properly accessed by 90% of the people who play it. But we think everybody knows it but us, because the only people we want to listen to are the ones that have formed that friendship with music. And the friendship starts with this: whatever I play is what I can play for now, and I appreciate that. If you don't have that, then you're always trying to stretch beyond what you could do. I have some students here, and I know once in a while their complaint was that, and I knew they stopped appreciating what they could do. That's the only way you can get there. But you can add to what you can do. But there has to be a floor, and the floor is self-acceptance. Do you think we need music to have self-esteem issues? Don't we have enough shit going on to fuck with our self-esteem? Do you really need music to do that? How about getting your head straight, and music's the thing that starts to make sense? And it's not about the performance at all. But if you truly achieve that, the performance improves. It's so funny, you know. It's the way, you know. I don't know if there is a God. He's got a very weird sense of humor. You can have whatever you want, just don't want it. Don't be stuck wanting it. As soon as you want it, you're gonna take yourself out of the game. So act like you don't want it. Come in. Where is it? You know. I mean, we all know that game. You guys are here today because I think you're all fairly enlightened. What is the issue? Is the issue that if I don't change my life, I'll never be happy? Or am I practicing learning to be grateful, if not happy? And these ideas apply very well to study. You're studying how I'm going to go. By the time you start to see that stuff, slowly, you understand how lines connect changes. Anybody else?
Matt, go ahead.
Yes. How do you pick the target notes? Do they have to be diatonic chord tones? And is what is happening when you're soloing? Is it that you know your target notes a split second before you start filling in with the altered scale?
No. If you're playing, you don't have target notes. You're practicing the target notes so that your playing starts to move by itself more to the grid. Do you understand that first? Let me ask you that.
Yes, you practice it first and then the target notes become unconscious.
No, you don't have target notes, but you notice your playing is being magnetized towards a grid that moves to one chord and out to another. But you don't have target notes anymore. When you do have target, now let me answer the first thing, which is a very good question. The target notes, it could be a weird note if it's the altered scale, because I can go, but that is in the scale. It's in the altered scale. But normally, let's do two chords that aren't with a altered scale. Let's say I can't really say that, even if it's out of the scale. All right, here. If I'm not going to use the altered scale, right? So let's say I make it this, which is not even in there. that's the altered scale. I guess what I'm trying to say is, and for starters, let's keep it simple. You start from a note, the next target note is a member of that scale. And if it's an altered scale, then you have the flat 9, sharp 9, sharp 11, flat 13. So if I went, I used the flat 9. What if I do this? Now I've passed it already and I need three or four more notes. See, if you just measure it, that was a killing line, you know? Now let's do it with the flat 13. I'm not going to go, now it's too close together. See how I used up those notes and ended up on the flat 13? Of course you've heard that, but now you know what it is. Let's try it another way. Each one of these is just a different line that connects the first note to the second. The purpose of practice, and that's what I wanted you to understand, but the purpose of practicing it is that when you just go to play, you notice your lines are trending towards the essentials of the changes. Instead of like, you know, I can't really imitate someone that plays very approximate. You know, I can't, but let's say that's where your blowing is. If you keep making these targets, you might start to play. Even that. I could ask you right now, you already know what I'm doing. And maybe all your life you said, what is that magical shit they're playing? But there is a very simple system, and evoking it will influence your playing. It takes longer than just changes, because arguably the most difficult thing in music is playing what they call lines over changes. You know, like off the top of your head. It's taken for granted because the people who can do it so easily. But when it really is, it's like hitting a baseball. I mean, it's like really, it takes time to develop a sensibility. And where do you get the notes from? The scale. If the scale runs out, you add some chromatics. Let me play something easier, okay? You know what I'm doing, right? This can help you really enhance your sense of melody, even if you're not blowing on changes. Who's next?
Felix, go ahead.
Hi, Kenny.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your great stuff. I asked a little question about this stuff. I've been working on this stuff since you made a course on Jazz Heaven, and it's really great. But when you play on modal tunes, like So What, do you always
Very good
think
question.
like D minor, or do you impose other chords?
Very good question. You notice I didn't do modal because
Yeah.
modal music, let me do a little explaining about what modal music is.
Mm.
Jazz was very much harmonically along the grid, if you will, of European classical music. When the modal thing started to happen, it's not a coincidence that the African American experience started to be enhanced. And among those things was a different way of expressing linear thought as a rhythm. So the modal music has more rhythmic, I mean, you could disagree, that's fine, and you're welcome to that. Modal music has more of a rhythmic meaning than a melodic meaning, because it doesn't necessarily connect. So hard bop was bebop moving more and more rhythmically until it got to modal. And the apex of that was McCoy Tyner. If I was really set up right now, I would play McCoy Tyner circa 1970 something. Not 60s, because then he was in a train. I mean, it was the most burning thing because it was almost all. That's really not my heart. I love it. I respect it. When McCoy Tyner came to Boston when I was at Berkeley, I went to see him every night, and every night I was like. But the guy that really captured my heart first was Bill Evans. That's not a judgment thing. You really can't. You have to. There's a song, "Only Trust Your Heart." You know, you can't demand. Of course, students get confused. I should like this. I should like that. But the fact is, I caught him every night. I caught Chicory every night. Bill Evans was the first one. But when Keith Jarrett came along, I was gone. I was gone. I said, that's everything I ever wanted to play. It has the ornamentation of Liszt, Chopin, but it's as burning as anything there is. So I obviously just come more out of that. And there are people for whom the pentatonic scale, which is modal playing, feels like a deeper inner contact. It could be almost ancestral, and that doesn't mean it has to be ethnic, you know? But it's a great thing, and I would send somebody to somebody if they really wanted to master modal playing. Now, a little bit of combination is kind of interesting. Those little chromatic transitions. I guess that would be considered kind of hard bop. When I play, I can't show you how I would play because it would depend on the situation, who I was playing with, and what mood I was in at that particular moment. And I guess the guy was talking about playing with intention. I totally agree. But my intention is fluid. My intention is whatever's happening for me right now, that it get played without interference. You know, these days they call it flow state. But I've been talking about this for over 30 years because it was something I did. And when I started teaching, I didn't know that it was something most people weren't doing because their mind was asserting what they should be doing. Even when it's successful, I can hear a player and I can read his mind or her mind or their mind, you know. Oh yeah, this is this or that, which is fine. But when I feel, and I show examples of people like this in my courses at Berkeley and also in online courses, someone that is receiving and their hands or their armature are instantly translating it into music. For me, that's fascinating or proves there is a higher power. And when a person tunes into a higher power, you have to trust what you're playing. How can you tune into a higher power if you're trying to change what wants to come out? And who is it that wants it to come out? And you can get into, it could be a spiritual or a philosophical journey, and it can be a lifetime. And most of us are on it, whether we realize it or not. Who's playing? Where's this coming from? But if you're caught up in the intellectual steel wool, I'm saying that because we just put steel wool in the wall because I had mice. So I'm thinking steel wool's a good analogy. You know, gotta play. I don't want you to, that's not the way you want to live and die. And that's what music was for you. It was never that intention. You can find it, and it comes from within you, and it comes through you. And even if it's great thing about piano is a person that doesn't know how to play it, if they change that neurological idea, like who am I to be playing the piano, they can have everything that was ever available in the spiritual transmission of the notes. Oh God, when that's happening to you, I say this to you with all my heart. How did they get back to G minor? I swear it was not intentional. Anybody else? We have a little more time, I guess.
Yep.
We're pretty up to Sid?
Yeah, Susan had a question, Rachel.
Yes,
as well.
Susan.
Go ahead.
That's all right. I mean, I'm in my home right now, so.
Kenny, I studied with you years ago back in New Jersey. And at the time, I remember we worked a lot on connecting the line with a half step over the changes. And that's become very automatic for me over the years. But I find in my playing, sometimes I'm connecting with a full step or even a minor third. And I don't know if it's because maybe I'm doing a lot of the melodic standards and not the bebop. But does that change the approach? I mean, is that okay, or is it lacking cohesion doing that?
No, it's totally okay. I'm not sure you're phrasing your own question exactly the way you would like to. Is it, it doesn't really matter because bebop, the harmony of bebop comes from standards, so it's really the same thing. And then if you want to take it away from standards, you come down to diatonic music. That's folk, rock, blues, which is usually, anybody's really playing blues is just playing the blues scale. Even when the chords change, the scale is the same. No, there's really no difference. Now, if you do it very well, then you should be enjoying the melodicism. What some people will say is, yeah, but I do it so well now, it's like I always play the same thing. Was there any of that in your question, Susan? I could be totally wrong.
Well, I don't know. I think so. When we practiced lines, one of the things that we talked about was always approaching through a half step to make the connection over the chord change.
In order to learn how to play lines, do you have to do that for the rest of your life? No. Most people could not connect one chord with another. I don't know you, and we could talk offline sometime, but a lot of people play a few notes on one change, a few notes on another change. They don't play through the changes. So now I get what you're saying. What I was showing you was not, this is what you must do. What I was showing is that once you can do this, you can get away from it and things still coagulate. Things still move through changes. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else?
Rachel, go ahead.
Music is yours, guys. Yeah, yes.
Hi, Kenny.
Hi.
My question, I'm an absolute beginner with improvisation. And so I thought I'd start with something really simple. And you kind of reminded me of what I'm doing when you did Sounds of Silence and Autumn Leaves. Oh, can you hear me?
I'm having trouble. Is there anything you guys can do to make it louder in here?
Yes, we'll make it louder.
Go ahead. Can you try that again, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you hear me okay now?
I do, yeah. I don't know why, but I do.
Okay, great. Well, I'm an absolute beginner with improvisation. And so something you did reminded me of what I'm doing when you played Autumn Leaves and you did the Sounds of Silence. Although yours is a lot more elaborate than what I can do right now. And so what I'm doing is I'm embellishing a tune, putting little turns it and ghost notes as a way to improvise and stay in the form, but I'm also using parts of the tune to give me ideas to do little motifs too. So is that pretty much what you were doing with the
Yeah,
autumn leaves?
yeah. I think that's amazingly lucid, considering you're calling it. Did you play piano? Were you a classical player?
I was a classical player and I've been learning jazz for a few years now, but I've been neglecting the improvisation part. I think I
Yeah,
just
well,
was kind of
it's understandable.
overwhelmed. Yeah, I
If
love
you
playing
can
the melody, but
patiently, I got you now. If you can
okay,
patiently do those things in a way that it doesn't feel like it's running away from you, you know what I mean?
okay,
Like it's getting ahead of you.
yes,
If you allow it to formulate and you're practicing, if you just want to trust it, then you're playing. And I think both are very
okay,
needed. If you only formulate, you forget how to trust. But you know, Rachel, actually you're on the screen.
yes.
And most of the people who are talking this, they're on
Mhm.
another page. Trust means, and this could be one of those from music to life if you read my book, you know. Trust means you don't trust it's going to work out. You trust that that's what has to happen, whether it succeeds or fails. You want to get rid of that success failure. If you were a classical player, you were certainly totally abused by the idea. But if you're allowing yourself to explore, then glorify yourself for exploring. Absolutely. And the way you said it was very clear, very lucid. You can always take information from the actual melody. And one of the bad things about more developed jazz players is that they get away from the melody immediately, and so there's no sense of flavor of the song. You know, so I think that's a very good instinct of yours. You know, like I mean, that's a lot of language. If you want language, just be patient. And if you can look at it as like, wow, I have so much self-respect because I'm allowing myself to learn this stuff instead of judging myself every day. This is where so typically we get off track. At that point, it becomes painful to practice. And people say, yeah, I stopped practicing. And you know what? If it does represent that in your life, I support that. Don't practice unless you can, you know, give yourself, just think about what that is when you're not asserting your self-esteem in it. Wow, you know. God almighty, look around the world. That's what you get to do these days? Oh. You know, I mean, it's easy for me to say, but you know what I mean, what we do to ourselves. It would be nice to learn a different pattern. Now, many people, they finally start to notice that they've turned it around. Music nourishes them rather than I fall short. Once that starts to happen, I'm very told many times it was different when they went to the grocery store or the laundromat. Or, you know, it seems to be a wonderful way to learn a lesson about one's own humanity. And if you get too caught up on how good you play, for today we're going to call it steel wool. Great question, and great the way you express it. What you're doing, just keep doing that. Anybody else?
Thank you. I will, thank you.
Kenny, Bruce asked, can you please explain what you mean by the grid? You say it snaps to the grid?
The grid. The grid is every scale. People will, if I played on this tune like this. Actually, it's a bad example because you could play that whole tune diatonically. Let me go to All the Things You Are. Yeah. I'm still playing the D flat scale. The grid generally is a scale that takes that chord. So, but not only that, the grid also aims towards good resolutions. Like there are people that can play on changes, but it just sorts to wander, you know. I don't know if I can imitate it, but. I don't know. The grid would be more like this. See how it ornaments the root motion of the changes. I hope that that's clear enough, because that is the grid. Are you moving? Like, there are certain tunes that I don't care how great the player is, they can't play those tunes. Because every tune is to them is a bunch of changes. You know? And that definitely does not get it with certain tunes that have a flavor. But the flavor is lost immediately because they just go 2-5-1, you play this. You know, this, you play that. And they don't have they don't have the awareness there. The grid is also emotional. I'll give you a really good example. Some of you may know this tune. It's one of my top 3 favorite tunes from Michel Legrand. Wow, it just went out of my head. You Must Believe in Spring. First of all, what better message than that? You must believe in spring. That's a tune you can't just play to change it. You must believe in spring. That's a beautiful change. And one of the most beautiful changes in all of jazz. What a beautiful modulation. Of course, all the scales will be different now. And the targets. You must believe in spring. I know I must believe in spring. Now, are you just going to go? No. we should really be honoring friends today. One of my biggest influences was Michel Legrand, and I got to the point where he really loved my playing and had me on one of his records. But just to know him, because this music would just... By the way, each one of these have a target. Talk about motifs. The whole tune is a motif. I think we're really getting there. Sid, you want to just roll
Yes,
out
Kenny,
the
I think we just have one last question. I think it's a short one, and then we can get to introducing the course, which is from Philip. He asks, it seems that jazz lines are predominantly 8-note oriented. Can we use rhythmic motifs and targets?
Can you use what?
Rhythmic motifs and targets.
Yeah, well, rhythmic motifs, of course. What goes between the eighth note, and it doesn't have to be eighth notes, it can be triplets, it can be 16th notes. What makes them percussive is rests. So yeah, at first you learn how to connect things, but if you leave a note out and you skip, that's actually part of the training. That's also rhythmic. You might go da ba da ba da ba da ba da, or da ba da ba da ba da ba. Or you might go ba 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 da ba da ba, or ba da ba da ba da ba, ba da ba da ba da. Rhythms or syncopation are. If you hear a steady stream of eighth notes, you're hearing time. If you remove some of them, you're hearing syncopation. And that is a whole exploration into itself. You can remove just a certain note here, a certain note there, and it gives the whole thing a shape. Actually, the only thing that gives music shape is resolution, which is the end. Stopping is what gives everything that previously happened shape. Kind of like living and dying, Living is 2, doing your life is 5, and dying is 1, I guess. 1 big 2, 5, 1. But yeah, you create shape by rests. Each thing is a specific practice. With that practice, you build a structure. The body imbibes a structure of rhythmic melody, or rhythmic harmony, or melodic harmony. And that's why in developing the patience for practicing, the way a monk studies his scriptures, maybe not that intense. It leads to incremental enhancement in what you're playing. And yeah. So we're going to do a course. I don't know, sit and tell you about it. It's going to be 10 weeks of this kind of mapping of melody, every kind of way, and we'll start with the 2-5-1s, and then we'll move to anything and how to connect. And you will learn, if you're in our course, well, you can learn it now. The question is, can you stay with it? So this is 10 weeks of really investigating how to, the architecture of every line, getting used to it, getting to know it, and hopefully knowing how to practice it in the future.
So yeah, like Kenny said, Kenny's gonna start offering this course the 15th of August, and it's going to be 10 weeks long, and it's going to be a course that's really in great detail, studies the idea of playing lines over changes. Sorry, can you say that again?
No, I'm saying I bid you adieu, which is one of about 5 French words I know. Yeah, everybody. Hey, Kathy, I just got you, you came on this page. God bless you.
Thanks, Kenny.
You're welcome. You're welcome, guys. Go ahead, Sid.
So what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna drop the link to where you can register for the course. It's gonna be a 2 hour week. It's gonna be a weekly course where every week Kenny's gonna spend 2 hours with you, giving you exercises, looking at you play, looking at you work on specific homeworks that he gives you, investigating stuff like how do you get from this target point to that target point, and slowly how do you incrementally move towards a state of being able to fluently play lines. And this is what we're going to be studying over these 10 weeks. And I've just put in the link to the course in the chat, and you can read in detail some of the things that you do get is, you're able to book a free 15-minute phone call with Kenny to kind of talk to him in more detail and ask him whether or not this suits you and where you're at, and would this be something that's good for you to be able to make a more informed choice. So you have that option to be able to talk to Kenny before you make a choice. Also, you can if you're one of the first 5 people to enroll in this course, you're going to be able to get a private lesson with Kenny, and you can study any topic of your interest. And also, if you register before the 8th of August, you also get a bonus group session on the topic of lines. But this is, you can go, read about this course in great detail on that link. After this class is over, I'm going to send a recording of this masterclass with all the details that you need to be able to read about the course, know about the course, and also enroll into the course, which the same page will also have the ability for you to book a phone call with Kenny to talk to him personally in more detail to see whether or not this course is a choice for you. But that's kind of it. Do you have any specific questions on the course? I can answer them. If not, I'm going to drop the link again in the chat, and you can visit the page and really understand what this course is about. I'm also going to reach out to you via email with the recording and the details about the course. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. If not, we can leave it here. And thank you so much again for enrolling for this masterclass. It was amazing to have you guys all here. So thank you so much. You have a wonderful day or night wherever you are.